At the conclusion of Steven Universe's Garbage and Here's Why, I made this remark about the LGBT spectrum. This is applicable toward, well, really anybody who falls under the LGBT spectrum. Is it a spectrum? I'm gonna say it is, because this doesn't fit in a spoken dialogue very well, and this is a slur, and fuck that noise. This would, in any sane world, be the exact opposite of a controversial statement, but sadly we don't live in a sane world. We live in a shitty world, where this offensive slur is being pushed by a small number of people as an umbrella term for the entire LGBT community. This attitude is fucking gross, and here's why. The usage of the Q slur as an identifier is the subject of a lot of debate, usually centered around the term's origin and whether it's appropriate to use the term or not. Unfortunately, the debate itself splits into two separate camps, only one of which I hold a strong and passionate objection to. The first camp are people who choose to use the Q slur as a self-identifier because I don't really know why. Everyone seems to have different reasons for using it, but the general gist of it is that the dozens of other terms are not good enough for one reason or
Okay, admittedly, that's part of the reason I use the term. Bisexual, panromantic, polyamorous, non-binary, femme is a bit of a mouthful. More importantly, it's been very important for me as I've explored my own romantic, sexual, and gender identities. I know I'm not straight, monogamous, or cisgender, but it's taken me a while to give names to what I actually am. Moving on.
Another. The other camp are the advocates for the adoption of the Q slur as an umbrella term for the entire LGBT community, arguing that the large and diverse pool of terminology is too specific, and we need to make everything more broad and all-encompassing.
You know, it's amazing. You are 100% wrong. I mean, nothing you've said has been right.
We can talk about those fucking jackasses in a moment. The central argument to both of these people is that the Q slur wasn't originally a slur and was originally a term used proudly by the LGBT community back during the era of the Stonewall riots before it was co-opted into a slur by straight people to take power from the LGBT community. Except that's not its actual origin. The Q slur originates from a 16th century German word meaning oblique or perverse, and it finds its roots in the English language as a term to mean strange and odd. It also has a third-person usage, which means something that has been ruined. You may actually remember the word's proper usage from The Nightmare Before Christmas, of all things.
What's this? In here, they've got a little tree. How queer! And who would ever think?
Oh boy. If I can give some actual historical context, queer started to be used as a homophobic slur in the 19th century. From the research I've done, I've been able to ascertain that its usage as a reclaimed slur dates back from the 80s and grassroots AIDS activism. Groups like Queer Nation and Fed Up Queers reclaim the slur as a way of saying, yes, we're gay, we're different, we're still humans in trouble. You politicians, get off your lazy asses and help us like you should. Pretty much. Moving on.
The usage of it to refer to an LGBT person is an informal use, like when people use literally as a form of hyperbole. The word is not a kind word, objectively. It has never been, and it never will be. And the belief that the term originates as an LGBT term is not only wrong, it's a dangerous precedent to set for modern young people who haven't read up on the actual history of language.
Drama queen much? As a grown-ass NB adult who has a degree in language and understands how it actually works over time, I can tell you that you're 100% wrong on that, Lillian.
The Q slur has more in common with the neo-Nazi pejorative degenerate than it does anything else. But isn't its history as an LGBT term important to consider? No, Billy, it really isn't. Why not? For the same reason that the crows in Dumbo are looked down on today.
Oh, wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
Oh, really? I'm sorry. Did I miss the time when MLK or Asada Shakur used the crows in Dumbo to advocate for black liberation? That analogy is horseshit, and shame on you for putting it out there. Just have a seat. I'm embarrassed for the both of us.
Even if we accepted the premise that the Q slur was originally a point of LGBT pride with no other history behind it, that wouldn't be the win card so many people think it is, because guess what else was a point of pride for LGBT people?
I'm just a sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania.
Rocky Horror Picture Show was a fucking galling film released in 1975 that took every transmisogynistic trope possible, rolled them into a single character that then rapes two people and grooms another to be a sex slave, and somehow beyond all reason, this has become a huge piece of LGBT culture, applauded and almost never spoken out against. Very rarely does someone speak out against it, at which point a lot of other LGBT people will dogpile on those people for daring to question a shitty portion of LGBT culture as if we're somehow exempt from the same levels of basic human decency that other people are.
Holy fucking guacamole. Look, Lillian, I think anyone who's actually seen Rocky Horror understands that, what's-his-face, Frankenfurter, is the villain of the piece, and everything he does is painted as villainous. Also, he's not a trans woman. The best modern-day equivalent I can compare him to is Roger the Alien from American Dad. As for Rocky Horror being a key aspect of LGBT culture, well, the LGBT movement has a long and complicated relationship with speculative fiction in general, and that would have to be a longer conversation in another video.
Problems like this are all over the LGBT community, with properties and people who would be considered brazenly offensive and gross in any other demographic held up and applauded as icons. Rocky Horror Picture Show is just the most notable example on a very long list of extremely problematic faves.
Says the woman who gushes about the most transphobic dumpster fire of a Family Guy episode ever, which, might I add, Seth MacFarlane gave an explanation for that turns my stomach. Yeah, not like this is a mindset that's ever gotten a trans woman or another LGBT person killed. Oh fucking wait.
While people might like to make the claim that LGBT people in the 60s used to call themselves the Q slur, this isn't exactly winning the argument, because all you're telling me is that the gay community of the 60s was extremely problematic. Hey guys, guess what? One of the N-words appears in Martin Luther King's letter to Birmingham jail. That doesn't mean you should start running out and calling people that. If this letter was written today, the word would not fucking be there, because we've long since realized that it never should have been used in the first fucking place, because that's how the evolution of cultural enlightenment actually works. It was always unacceptable, and the fact that our parents did it anyway is a bad mark on them. But hasn't the Q slur been reclaimed? Like the other N-word was? Billy, that's not the same thing. Why? Because nobody is actually dumb enough to try and use the N-word in a civilized conversation. An uncommon but persistent defense of the adoption of the Q slur is to draw comparison to the reclamation of the N-word by black people, but reclamation and adoption are two very different things. Despite the long-standing reputation that black people can use the N-word and white people can't, in reality, nobody can really use it because it's still recognized as a slur. It doesn't matter what color your skin is, if you use it, you're still gonna get funny looks, you're still gonna be asked to leave public places, you're still gonna be treated about the same way as if you publicly uttered any other vulgarity, and you're still gonna be laughed at if you're pathetic enough to complain about that.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong.
Well, maybe that should be a fucking hint for you, Lillian dear. My school doesn't have a department called Nigger Studies. My brother uses it in some of his music and among friends, but he doesn't exactly go around spouting it at work or in front of our parents. Queer is hardly comparable to that word, and shame on you for trying to compare them. Nigger is a word used to treat black people, my people, as subhuman. The other is a statement of, maybe I'm different, and that's okay. This is not that hard to understand, lady.
You wouldn't stand up and scream fuck in the middle of a restaurant, and the same rule applies there. Nobody pushes for the adoption of the N-word. Nobody tries to rebrand people of color as the N-word community. Nobody gets bitchy if someone else doesn't want the word uttered in their presence. While someone may use it to refer to themselves, they would never be so stupid as to use it to refer to another. It is an antagonistic word and is treated as such. The Q slur is, unfortunately, not afforded the same level of restraint. People treat reclamation as if it's some kind of magical society changer, as if they're the Supreme Court of language.
Oh, miss me with that drivel. The leader of my nation has been stripping rights from LGBT folks since he and his conversion therapy supporting vice president took office 3 years ago. Hundreds of my trans sisters are being murdered every year. My family won't accept me as non-binary still. And you know what hasn't had a goddamn thing to do with any of that? A reclaimed slur.
When people fill my ear about the fact that the Q slur is being reclaimed as a term by the LGBT community, all I can really wonder is when this actually happened, because it seems to be an extremely contentious topic because the word has a harmful and deadly legacy. People love to talk about the LGBT community of the 60s, but what about the people who were beaten and killed by others while having it screamed at them?
What about the people who hit the streets every day in the late 80s, early 90s, demanding to be treated like human beings and afford the medical care that they deserve? Oh, I guess they don't count because they use the no-no words. Get the fuck out of here.
What about the people who've experienced the harsh truth of being called that slur and are quite frankly disgusted that some idiot kids would have the nerve to just declare that everything's okay now?
Yeah, idiot kids like Larry Kramer. Idiot kids like the people who wrote the Queer Nation Manifesto. Choke, you condescending bitch. I hate to get so heated over this. I don't normally do it. And I don't even think people are necessarily wrong to not like using reclaimed slurs. But the fact that Lily has made this wholly historically illiterate, condescending video, and to this day constantly tries to paint LGBT folks who disagree with her on this as the bad guys who are just fetishizing our oppression, is incredibly frustrating. Not to mention, a community of people who self-identify as queer does exist, whether you like it or not. And the statement of, we're different and that's okay, we're still human and we still demand our rights, is not fetishizing our oppression. In short, I take back every nice thing I ever said about Lily Orchard. She's not doing or saying anything no one else couldn't without the smug condescension. Thanks very much for listening. I'll go deeper into the political power of the word queer in my next video. And as always, peace, love, and stay hydrated.